Well, the day came that we never imagined was really, really, truly going to come. Bob has officially retired from radio. And on this episode of the Oddcast, Tony Garcia and I and Max are going to take you behind the scenes to the future of the Bob and Sheri Show.
We always have an odd one in the crowd.
So it's kind of odd.
Decidedly odd.
Doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd?
No, that doesn't strike me as a little bit odd.
It's the Bob and Sheri Oddcast, the stuff we wouldn't, couldn't, or shouldn't do on the regular show. Now, here's the Oddcast.
Good morning, Bob. This is Christine from North Carolina, and I want to respond to something you just said. You said this is just a radio show, and I wanted to tell you that it's not just a radio show that you and Sheri do every morning. And, you know, for me, since 1999, I've listened to you and I really have enjoyed your show. You know, I had a long commute and I'd listen to the radio 35 miles each way in the morning. And, you know, I've gone through relationships. I've had my child. When she was a toddler, she used to say, "Mommy, put on the Bob and Sheri Show." And we would listen to you while I drove her to daycare. I mean, you're part of our lives. We feel like you're our friends. We identify with you. We love you. We love your personalities. We love your opinions, and we love your quirks. We feel like we've shared in your lives and your spouses, your kids, your grandkids, and all the things that happen and that we identify with as well. Whenever there's a cultural or a world or a news event, we tune in to see what Bob and Sheri have to say about this. We really, really love you, and we're really, really going to miss you, Bob. I don't know how to convey to you how much you mean to your audience, and saying goodbye feels like such a painful closure that we're not going to hear you on the radio every morning. But I wanted to thank you for all the laughs and all the memories, and there have just been so many. We will never forget you, and we're going to miss you so much. And I wish you the very, very best in your retirement. I hope it's everything that you've dreamed of and that you and your lovely wife get to enjoy life with your kids and your grandkids and share in those family memories that you're going to make. I just wanted to tell you how much we love you, Bob. And it's not just a radio show. It's like our family.
And joining us on this episode of the Oddcast is my partner in Now Media, Tony Garcia, and the person who launched the Bob and Sheri syndication into the universe all those many years ago. We have all worked together for such a long time, including Lamar, who is not the new guy by any stretch.
Yeah.
And we wanted to play that message because she landed on the thing that we wanted to build and create and did build and create, and that is a community that wasn't just a radio show. Like we have this we call it Bob and Sherryville. Like we all live in different places, right? We live all over the country. We live around the world on Joe Radio, on the Armed Forces Network. But we're all residents of Bob and Sherryville. And it's been the privilege of all of our careers to be able to do this and to get away with it for as long as we have. Because as Tony will tell you, get away with it is the right way to express what the Bob and Sheri Show has done in an industry that doesn't really understand a show like this.
Yeah. Our old boss used to call it getting over. It was like, we got over. And and it's really true. Once I said this is like serving bacon to rabbis, and I think that there's some truth in that, Cher. I think that what makes the show special for the listeners is what makes the show challenging,
incomprehensible.
Okay, that's your word, not mine. I'm going to use the word challenging. For our broadcast partners and for our potential broadcast partners, because the show doesn't meet the expectations that a lot of programmers have for a very fast-paced, a very forward-moving program that has what the industry calls benchmarks, or what a listener would call features, that run regularly every day at the same time. And the way we handle those is different. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, who was listening to another morning show that's in syndication and said, "Oh, there's this segment that they do, and it's so funny." And I said, "You do know that those are actors, right?" And there was this long pause. What do you mean those are actors? I'm like, they're not real calls. They're not real callers. I'm like, have you ever had a conversation that went from 0 to World War III in 5 seconds? Human beings don't get into it that way. It boils up. But unless you're dealing with, somebody who's completely mad, you don't get a conversation from 0 to World War III in 5 seconds.
Tony, you're not usually on with us, but at this point I say, hey, we've got to take a break.
That's the pause music. That's the shut up and stop talking music. That's the name of the song. Shut up and stop talking. So Tony, continue your explanation, because this is we told you we're going behind the scenes. And so this is the universe in which we operate.
So there's a lot of shows that do these things that we call benchmarks in the trade. And they are things like, and I'm just gonna out them. There are things like second date update. And the premise is that you've gone out on your first date and you kind of like each other, and then you go on a second date and, oh my gosh, it all goes south. And then there's some argument that ensues. There's another one that floats around out there, and it's called The War of the Roses, where someone, for an example, Sheri, I would have, you'd be the listener and you won some roses, and you'd want to thank me for sending them. And then they've got my wife on the other line. And the hilarity ensues. Yeah. And I think our audience, A, is too mature for that. And B, is that's a harsh form of humor, right? Because someone is being embarrassed.
Is being hurt and humiliated. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody's being humiliated. And that's why there's actors. And that's why these things are done with actors. There's other things where they'll do, they call it the blank court, where a parent will supposedly ask a question, and then the listeners will come back with advice on how to deal with their kids or how to deal with a social situation, those are a little closer to reality. There are fewer of those that have actors in those. But we don't, you guys have never done that. When I first heard about Bob and Sheri, one of the things I really liked about what you guys did was it wasn't that kind of stuff that was, all over radio from the time I started 40 years ago. They've been tweaked and they've been updated and they've been modernized, but those devices are still in use. And to be fair, they're popular with some listeners.
People don't know. Yeah,
right. I'm not sure that the listeners know or don't know that those second date updates and the War of the Roses things are staged, but they are memorable features that the audience recalls. There are some shows that make podcasts out of those features and distribute them. So, humor is subjective, right? There are very few things that are objectively funny. So some people like those. Some people, laugh at those things. That's not what the Bob and Sheri Show was ever about. But by the way, I'm glad for, because it's a different kind of approach. But having said that, there are some programmers that listen to it and say the show's boring, because there's a conversation going on, and that conversation is 99.9% interesting. Sometimes it's funny. In general, it is fun. I would say that the show is fun, but I've had a station in the Midwest that canceled us because the manager, after 6 months, the management thought that the show was boring. And I'm like, you don't understand. You don't understand. You didn't ask a listener if you thought the show was boring. Your management thought the show was boring because it did not meet the expectation you had for a morning show. And that's right. And that's a challenge we've dealt with for as long as we've been in syndication.
So let me say, like, while there's plenty of entertainment to be found in make-believe, like, you know, when I watch something on TV, George and Mandy's First Marriage on CBS, folks, I know that's not a documentary. I know that's make-believe, and I'm very entertained by it. The issue that we always had with some of these features, like Second Date Update, is we felt like we couldn't push it to the audience and pretend it was real, that we would have to tell them this isn't real, but it's entertaining. Our community of listeners firmly rejects it. They're like, what's this bullshit? They don't want that. And so when you've built a show on authenticity, which we have, and on the relationship between the cast members and the audience, it's a dirty trick to now tell a lie and pretend that something is one thing when it's another. And while we're peeling the curtain back, Mr. Wizard, let me also say that the challenges that we experience in this industry are as impacted by the rapid pace of technological change that's impacting where you work, right? So more and more people are listening to radio in different ways than, you know, through a radio per se. Like they're listening through a stream or a smart speaker. They're doing delayed listening via a podcast. But our behavior with technology has changed. And part of the reason that you need actors for Second Date or War of the Roses is because real people are not so disciplined and so zippy and pithy with their stories of tragedy and heartbreak, and are not interested in being exploited and exposing their families to embarrassment or worse. So that's why actors are used for that. A lot of what you hear is also staged. So I'm a member of a closed group of radio performers, and it's the rare week where a call doesn't come out. Hey, is anybody available at this time, whatever time zone? We'll say 8:15 a.m. Central Time, to call in and play a game with us. And you'll be pretending to be a listener. I can never do and I know lots of people in the industry are like, sure, I got you. I'm there. I'll do it. I don't have a classic radio voice. My voice is so distinctive that I'm not allowed to pretend to be a listener, because wouldn't you know it right away? Wouldn't you know if you're driving?
Oh, you'd be outed. You'd be instantly outed.
Hey, I'm Molly, and I totally want to win those tickets. So I can never participate in these staged calls, but they're happening, and they're not being. And listen, I'm always in trouble. I am always in trouble. This will be no exception. They don't flag them as staged. They flag them as real. And if you're wondering, yeah, but why don't people want to win tickets? They do. But they want to win them via texting, via the app, via the website, via social media. Americans, on the whole, whether it's radio or anything else, don't want to talk on the phone. We want to use it to do other things. And so this behavior change, this dramatic shift in behavior, of course, impacts an industry like ours, where that's how we have traditionally engaged with the audience. So when we saw, and this is a long time ago, when we saw those behavioral shifts, which is what happens when you take the girl out of cultural anthropology, but you can't get that out of the girl. When we see these big behavioral shifts, we sit down and we go, look at what's coming. What can we do to be ready for it? So we used to be a show that the phone, we had weekly call reports that looked like a dictionary. And they got thinner and thinner and thinner as people began texting and emailing and commenting on social media. So we were like, all right, we need to create an easier way for people to talk, since they don't want to talk on the phone, which is where the talkback feature on our app came from. And the number of times, and Max is about to back this up, the number of times we reach out and go, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing story. Will you come on the show?
Come on the show?
And what do they say, Max?
Oh, sure. Okay, fine. So we'll arrange it, and then I try to call them, and nothing.
Nothing. So
they chicken out.
That's
They
been
chicken out.
Yeah, that's been a bit of a problem with. But I want to say something. The show had been going on, I think, about a year and a half when I joined you guys, and we had a guy from Whose Line Is It Anyway, and he was also on Drew Carey, Ryan Stiles. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
He said something that I think very much applies to the show. He said, there is a different quality to the laughter when people are laughing at improvised humor and people can tell the difference. And I think that you feel more bonded to the people that are doing it because you realize they're just doing this off the top of their head. And that is most of what's happened when we're doing the show.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there is it's a vibe, right? It's not like you go, oh, these are guys, this is authentic, but that there's that vibe there where you go, hey, this is really happening right now.
Mm.
And they're really having fun together right now. And I think that, listeners get that. And I think listeners get that in a way that they can't express necessarily in words, but that is much different than the sort of manufactured. It's the difference between watching a sitcom in front of a live studio audience and watching a sitcom that has canned laughter.
Right. And there's something else that Tony said. I don't know, somewhere in the first couple of years when we were syndicating. So you're saying you're getting over. However, Tony also said, I've never worked so hard or laughed so hard in my life. That was something we used to always say to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sort of our motto, right?
Right.
And it's really true. And I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world because we've had so much fun. And we've talked about this before, and we talked about it on the happy hour last week. We've had some adventures. We've had some misadventures too.
Yeah.
But that whole, right, taken as a whole, right? Taken as a whole, oh my God, it's been fantastic.
We've had an incredible run, and we've gotten to do something. We got to do something that we believed in a world where no one else believed in it. We got to do it anyway. Right. And you cannot even begin to calculate what it means to us to have you, our listeners. One of the things that has come out of Bob's retirement announcement was this extraordinary outpouring of talkback messages and emails and DMs and comments on social media. And, over and over again, it was so humbling, and we were in tears a lot of the time, but it reaffirmed for us that we went the hard way, uphill, on ice, with a boulder on our backs in terms of radio. We could have built a different show and had a very different career. But we went uphill with the boulder on our backs on ice like Sisyphus. And what we saw when we got to the top was you. And we wouldn't do it any other way. No regrets. We do not in any way second guess the decisions that we made about programming. But I have to say that our decision to go forward with the show we wanted to make, talking to you, and being real and authentic, that may be our undoing as well. And we just have to call that into the room.
And Sheri, I'd like to add that on this day that you're listening, the day that this podcast will drop, there will be one or two cities in which Bob and Sheri will no longer be heard.
It's heartbreaking for us.
And I think that as heartbreaking as that is for us, I think that listeners have to understand a couple things that goes to what you were saying about the boulder and the ice and the hill. And that is that, even when we were corporately owned, the corporation, plural corporations that owned us, didn't have the wherewithal because they didn't have the number of radio stations or didn't have the interest in plugging Bob and Sheri Show into other markets like other companies. And there are other companies that own 500, 600, 1,200 radio stations that can force a show frankly, down the throats of their local programmers, whether the programmers want it or not. Those same people can block us from being on the air on those radio stations, and those same people can take us off the air on those radio stations. So on top of everything else, everything that we've done in terms of acquiring affiliates, we've done it on our own. We don't have really a strategic partnership with any one ownership group. There are two ownership groups that use us in several markets, and we're thankful for that, and we appreciate that. But we haven't had, an overlord that goes, hey, market X, put Bob and Sheri on. Hey, market Y, put Bob and Sheri on, as has happened for other shows. I'm not going to name those shows because that would be not right. But there are some shows that you go, these guys have come out of nowhere. And all of a sudden they're on 100 radio stations. And we were not, unfortunately, didn't benefit from that. In fact, well, the opposite of that. That's it hurt us in some cases.
And, it's kind of like Tom Hanks said in one of my favorite movies, there's no crying in baseball. This is just the way things are built, right? This is just the way things are built. And we've known it for a long time, and we've operated as best we can as a little tiny indie operation. And I'm going to answer a couple of questions that we've been asked. So we are beholden to our industry. We serve at their pleasure and mercy. We are a radio show that you can't hear without a radio station as a partner. Now, I know you're going, oh, that's not true, girl. I listen to the podcast. Yeah. So let me talk about that. So our show, syndication, as my first boss told me, will always break your heart because there's so much churn in it. You have a station, you lose a station. This one gets bought and sold. This one changes formats. You get new management. They decide to shake everything up. It's very seldom personal. It's just business. And so there's so much churn in network radio, which is what we do. Plus, we had a very transient subset of our audience, just by virtue of where we first launched the show. We had a lot of people that were mobile because they serve in the United States Armed Forces, and they would be they're here, and then they're transferred to Fort Benning, or they're transferred to 29 Palms, or they're transferred to Munich. Like they're all over the place. Over the years, we've heard from soldiers in Baghdad. We've heard from military family members in Germany. We've heard from people stationed with the United States Navy in Japan. So we've got this big mobile moving audience. And when they would get stationed to a new town or move to a new town, or we would lose an affiliate, they would be like, well, how can we listen? So back in 2006, before podcasts were called podcasts, they were called RSS feeds in those days. We were like, okay, we worked with a guy that was really a forward-thinking techno geek, and he was like, RSS feeds, Bob and Sheri, absolutely. And so me and Tony were like, RSS feeds, you betcha, let's do this thing. So we created the podcast. And eventually, Apple put a podcast app on the screen of your phone, and so did Google. And they began digitally encoding these RSS feeds. The Bob and Sheri podcast was so early that we didn't have that digital encoding. And there's nobody to answer the phone at Apple, Cupertino, California. There's no one there. It's like the Wizard of Oz. You go in and there's a big disembodied head yelling at you. And so in order to snatch our RSS feed back from our former corporate owners when we went independent, we had to do something called breaking the feed, which meant we lost all of our subscribers, and we had to rebuild from scratch. And we did. We did. This has been the story of the Bob and Sheri Show. We get bombed back into the Stone Age, and we get our best Flintstone attitudes on, and we rebuild, and we rebuild, and we rebuild. But there does always come a point where there's nothing. You're out of options. We aren't there. We are not there. Do not get confused. That is not what we're saying. Yeah, but we're explaining some context to you, so you know. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, there's no sour grapes here. It is what it is. But I did want to say also to address that question that the listener posed, and that is that without radio, you can't discover us and then can't find our podcasts, because since 2006, podcasts, and everybody listening knows this, podcasts have exploded. And good luck trying to find a podcast out of the 2 million podcasts that are out there.
So you've got the discoverability problem, but then you also have in podcasting, you have another problem. Podcasting is a lot like the world right now in terms of wealth distribution. You've got a couple of shows at the very tip top, and then you have no middle class at all. And then you have the rest of the shows at the bottom, will podcast for food. And the sad irony of that is that, like the Bob and Sheri Show, the Oddcast, even True Weird Stuff, the number of downloads we get puts us in the top 5% of podcasts in the whole world. And we can't monetize it. And when I say monetize it, that's not to buy us a yacht. When I say monetize it, that's to pay Max so he's not homeless. Right. And then there's the cost of, because this is something well, you could just, when Bob retires, you could just do your podcast. I could do my podcast when I get home from my job at IKEA, because here's the straight truth. You don't just talk into the microphone and your podcast flies through the air and lands on everyone's device. You have to pay for hosting and that's assuming that all the people who work on the podcast are able to work for no compensation. None, zero. So we can't just do the podcast, not because we're lazy or stupid, but because no one except for like the Kelsey brothers, Oprah, and Joe Rogan can just do the podcast.
And
in fact,
why?
a D-list reality. Well, let me just say,
I'm sorry. Finish. Yeah.
A D-list contestant on a reality show will be more successful in podcasting than any regular rank and file person. It's called the attention economy. And no, there's no crying in baseball, just like there's no crying anywhere else. It's just how it is. It's not personal. It's just how it is. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I was talking with some folks a while back, and if you take a step back and you think about it, most of the podcasts that are so successful, that sort of 1.1% that's at the very top, the people who host those podcasts were famous already. And that's to your point of the D-list, reality star. Those people were already famous. They already had a following. Joe Rogan was already a star before his podcast.
The attention
he had a career
economy.
He had several facets to his career before that. And there are very few, very, very few that are unknowns who all of a sudden become podcast stars. And even the Kelsey brothers, got one heck of a swift kick, pardon the pun, into the stratosphere of podcast downloads. Not that it's a bad podcast, but the Swifties really helped move that thing up, up the chain. It's your sisters, Cher.
my fellow Swifties. The attention economy.
Yeah, there's only a couple. There's really only a couple of podcasts where those people came out of obscurity. And usually it's a topic that is edgy, like Call Her Daddy.
Call Her Daddy. But you look at the OGs of podcasting, the Mark Marons, the Dax Shepherds, they were already famous. Mark Maron's podcast is amazing. He's sitting in his garage shooting the shit with George Clooney. Well, that is something that people are I'm listening to it, right? I'm a huge fan. So, and again, not sour grapes. It just is the way that it is. This is just how things work. So now do you begin to see some of the challenges that you are facing as a small creator, and we are a small creator, in the year of our Lord 2025. And I'm really proud of us as a show and as a team, because we have done it our way, and whether that was the right way or not, it was our way, and we did it, and no regrets. And we took this show independent, and absolutely no one thought we would succeed. No one. There wasn't one person who looked at us and said, well, this is going to work. People looked at us with a mixture of horror, pity, and glee at our coming downfall. We're 7.5 years into our independent life, and real proud of that. And that's because of you listening right now. You've made that happen.
Absolutely.
Now, I also want to say, and this is going to give Tony high blood pressure, and possibly he'll lose some hair. I'm a woman in an industry that's not super enamored of women. And I guess the perception has been that I'm just a kooky little gal with a spicy mouth, and, Bob's the brains of everything, instead of seeing us as the always truly equal partners that we've been. And so I think that we will probably take some losses based on a vote of no confidence in my ability to hold the show together. Which, can I tell you, as a Capricorn, as a Philly girl, fills my heart with black filthy murder. But I'm going to get over it. I'm going to get over it.
I think that's true. I think I think that's one of the places where, for years I've had guys say, well, shouldn't it then be Sheri and Bob? Yeah. And there's a couple of shows out there that have the woman's name first. But
that seems so petty and stupid.
Why are we worried about that? It's sort of petty and stupid. And at the end of the day, sort of meaningless. And I think that, when someone says that to me, that immediately says they don't understand what we're doing, because those two things have no connection to each other. And I think one of the great things, one of Bob's legacies, is going to be allowing this format to develop. And there are other air talent out there that have mimicked what you do, Sheri. There's one of them that you just tore her apart at a conference a while back. I think you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then there's one or two others, that are floating around. There's one lady who's in smaller markets. I think she's in Kentucky. There's another one that's working in Boston right now. That and some credit you, some absolutely go, "Hey, Sheri Lynch taught me what I'm doing," and some not so much. But the one that you tore up, her program director got tapes of you and said, listen to Sheri do what she does.
Copy this. This. And, I wish all of my sisters success. I have never been someone who thought that all the pie should be mine. It's a pretty big pie. And, there's room for everybody at this table. So I wish my sisters success, and however they may find it. I also have a little piece of advice for them, and that is, do not for 1 second mistake proximity to power for actual power, because you don't have it, girl. You don't. You are a pawn on the board. Every week I log into my private group and I hear people's wrenching stories of having just lost their job that day, and how hard it is to find another job. And you wouldn't believe some of what gets posted. You would say, there's no way that's happening. That's not even legal. Well, there's the law, and there's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, and there's what you can get away with if nobody blows the whistle.
So we have
I love my fellow sisters in radio, but y'all need to be watching your backs. Go ahead.
This is a business that was developed during the good old boy era and the sort of Mad Men era. And a lot of that is still here. The misogyny is still there. This is still in the year of our Lord 2025, it is still a challenge for women on any number of levels. There's an individual, again, I don't want to name names here because that would not be appropriate, but you and I both know about the air talent in a major market who has won awards and been recognized by our industry for being a consummate broadcaster, and the entire time was abusing women in the radio station until enough of them came forward. And then finally, after those women had to tell their humiliating stories, finally he was let go. And I think, and I could be wrong about this, but I think he's been brought back.
Yeah, they've rehabilitated him.
And so
he was punished less for sexual assault than I'll be punished for any one of any random things I've said on this podcast today. And you know that's true, Tony.
Right. No, I think that's true. And I think, there are certain people in this business that will listen to this podcast and will turn around and just broadcast it. We did a podcast a couple of years ago where we did a little something like this and talked about the inside of how the industry works. And that person called everybody at his corporation and told them we threw radio under the bus, which we did not. Look, radio is an amazing medium. It is an intimate medium. It is a medium that you can take with you anywhere. It is an amazing entertainment medium. Now, having said that, are there downsides to this? Absolutely. Absolutely, because the radio industry has forgotten that it's an entertainment medium. The radio industry has, as a result of cost cutting and consolidation, provided, in my opinion, less listener value. And as a result of that, listeners go, and the technological advances are choosing Spotify. They're choosing podcasts because they're dissatisfied with what a lot of radio, not all, but what a lot of radio stations are delivering to them in terms of what they believe, their entertainment product should be.
Well, there's in some cases, not all, in some cases, there's such a disconnect between who the audience is and what the ownership wants to force down the pipeline that it's bewildering. Like you look at it and you go, wait a minute, what are you doing here? Like this makes no sense. Something that we've had the luxury of doing, and I say luxury because it's as expensive as a luxury, something we've had the luxury of doing is research. When we took this show independent, Tony and I were committed to a couple of things. First, our people would not go to bed at night dreading tomorrow because they were afraid they'd be fired. And second, we weren't gonna guess. We weren't gonna guess at what we were doing. We were gonna know, which is why we drive y'all crazy with surveys. Those are not because we want to drive you all crazy. Those are because we genuinely are looking at and paying attention to how you use the show and what you want more of or less of, and how we can make the experience better. That's why we do those surveys. That is the only reason why we do those surveys. And we act on the information that we get. And I know this is going to be hard to believe, but I think we're maybe at this point in the economy and reality, I think maybe 10% of our industry is investing in research like that. Tony, am I wrong? Do I have my numbers wrong?
I don't know about the percentages, but I would say, because the funding isn't there. Because of cost cutting, a lot of these things that are perceived to be nice to haves by, the corporate guys are like, you don't need that. You don't need that research. You don't need that promotion budget. It's why that in general, radio stations are less visible in their communities than they once were.
Than they were.
There was a time when there was a crew of people called the promotions department, and they made sure that station vehicle was in every Christmas parade, Veterans Parade, 4th of July celebration in every town, or as many towns as they could be in their listening area. But as those have been considered non-essential, those jobs have gone away, those people have gone away. And so all of a sudden your radio station that used to be on billboards and used to be in the Christmas parade and used to be, I don't know, anything else in the community, they're not as visible as they once were because there's no people to do it.
Because when you have to, when you're a publicly traded company, whether it's radio or, cheeseburgers or, industrial widgets, when you're a publicly owned company, you're answerable to your shareholders. And your shareholders, they want one thing. They want profit. They want profit. And then next time they want a little more profit, and so on and so on. And when you run out of ways to bring profit in, then you create the illusion of profit by cutting costs. And we were a business. When I say we, I don't mean Bob and Sheri, I mean the radio industry, this kind of radio. We were a business that was very, very, very dependent on people who had incredible programming chops, people with marketing skills, people who, work in front of the mic like we do, producers like Max and Doc. You had so many people inside a radio station to make it rock. You had salespeople and sales assistants, marketing people, marketing assistants. You had interns. You had news and weather people, because as broadcasters, we serve at the public's pleasure. We have an obligation to you because we're occupying public property. In our case, the FM band. That's public property. That's physical real estate that you own, and we have an obligation to you. So when you start cutting people, you start losing some of that. And it happened pretty fast. My entire radio career, I just feel so lucky in so many ways, because I came into radio just as something called consolidation was beginning. That was not an optimal time to come into radio, but I don't suffer from the good old days syndrome. I've only ever known this. I've only ever known, um, you know, big companies buying up other companies and consolidating and doing vertical integrations. And, pretty soon you've got 7 people working at a company that's servicing 27 radio markets. That's all I've ever known. So I don't sit around bemoaning, the loss of the good old days. These are the only good old days I've ever had. And I think because of that, and where I feel lucky about that, I'm not even a little bit surprised when something comes down the pike that represents a massive challenge to how we operate. And I love and I'm so proud of the way we have taken those challenges right in the face and dusted ourselves off and figured out a workaround. I will never not be so proud of that, you guys, because that is our reality.
And, and when we hear from our listeners and from Bob and Sherryville that what an impact the shows had on their lives, and for so many years, so many of those listeners have been listening for decades. It's gratifying. You've done
it's everything,
right? You've had an
it's
impact. Everything. In a place where in an industry where it's hard to get an attaboy. Those are very few and far between. To know that the listeners recognize it, even if the broadcasters don't in some cases. That's something for you and Max and myself and everybody else on the crew to, smile about, to take some pleasure out of that and some satisfaction out of the impact that the show's had on so many people. And you think about all the people we've met over the years, even starting with the crazy time when we were traveling 3 weekends a month.
Yeah.
Right up until our trip to Maine this past summer, and all those people we've met, and some of them that we've met over and over and over again, that keep coming to see you guys. I think that's I think we can all, if the world ended tomorrow, I think we could all feel good that we did the right thing for the right reasons for the right people.
That is 100%. You could carve that in stone. Bob and I knew a long time ago. We sat together and we agreed that this was what we were going to do and this was how we were going to do it. And it was the only thing that mattered, that we were going to just be with you, the listeners. The show was going to be about just life and stuff and you. And we knew that we would pay a price for that. And we have. And then, it's some dark night of the soul stuff. Like sometimes I lie in bed and I think, well, God, girl, you're just a freaking hack. You should be, you know what? You should quit everything and live in complete isolation in the desert. And Max has that voice in his head too, because, you can, there's a point at which you say to yourself, I am riding into the fight every day and I believe so strongly in what we do. And you throw your obstacles my way and I'm like, get out of them. I am not going to be defeated. And at some point you do say to yourself, psst, hey, maybe you're the one who's wrong. Maybe they're right. Maybe you should just shut up and do War of the Roses and play 12 songs an hour and, do 30-second breaks where you say stuff like, hey, you know what's important this time of the year? To remember to bring a scarf because keeping your neck warm is everything. Okay, back to here's whatever, right? We didn't do that. And sometimes I think maybe we should have, but we didn't. And we're not gonna. And it is, as Tony always says, it is what it is.
No, Sheri, it keeps getting easier.
It does keep getting easier.
There have been a few Tonyisms.
That's one.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. One of it, and I think one of our listeners, I still have it, by the way. One of our listeners sent you guys a mug, a coffee mug that says "It is what it is" on it.
Yeah, we should have that in Latin.
Which I know.
Stationery.
Oh my God, that would be a hoot. That would be a hoot. But yeah, that shows our optimism, though, right? Right. There's a pony under that pile of horse crap.
And
right?
It's
going to get better. It's going to get easier.
You guys, we keep finding the pony, though. The pile of manure gets a little bigger every now and again, and the pony stays the same size. But when COVID came and everything was insane and shut down, it took us a hot minute, but we found the pony. We have found the pony again and again and again. And we're looking for the pony right now. We just want you to know what we've never not been transparent, about how things are. And we thought with Bob leaving, it's a seismic transition. We thought it was really important to take you behind the scenes and show you some of the more gruesome parts of how the sausage gets made. And I want to say two things about Bob leaving. If you get the Bob and Sheri newsletter, which I think it comes out today, right, Tony? Monday, February 3rd.
No, it will. When people are listening to this, it will have come out the previous Wednesday. It comes out on the 29th of January.
Okay. If you don't subscribe to the Bob and Sheri newsletter, we all wrote something about Bob, and it was one of the hardest things to write. I struggled and struggled and struggled, and I'm not a person who struggles with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's my jam. I struggled because how do you say a million things in one little bite? How do I encompass the years of friendship and partnership, the things we have shared together, the things we've been through, the joys we've celebrated, and the losses we've barely been able to catch our breath from? How do I tell you about how long we've all been together, how I watched Tony's wife become pregnant with Michelle. Then I watched Michelle grow up, and then I officiated her wedding, and then I watched her have a baby. How do I describe to you watching Max navigate the end of his parents' life, and they lived to be more than 100. So it was a long navigation for Christopher Columbus here. How do we talk to you about the times we've just sat and wept together because one of us was in so much pain? Or the times we've sat with our hands clenched thinking, is this the year we win it? Is this the year we win it? Last July, in the interest of total honesty, last July, we were nominated for the Radio Hall of Fame, and we missed it by 3 votes. Now, if you listen to True Weird Stuff, you know that I'm the girl who tells you, listen, enjoy your life because you're going to die and be forgotten, so nothing matters, right? Just go out and live. And trophies and certificates and awards don't change that equation. But I wanted it for Bob. I wanted it so bad. I thought I would die. I had never wanted anything for myself the way I wanted that for Bob, because I knew that Bob probably would retire before July 2025. Didn't know when, but I knew that because he was telling me, Sheri, I'm done. Sheri, I'm done. So I knew. And I was like, please, God, please forget all of it. Please let him have this. He's done this since he was a teenager. And he's a one-of-a-kind talent, and he's worked so hard, and he's loved it so much. And the universe didn't give it to him. And I'm so pissed off about that. I have murder in my heart. As I sit here, Tony, I'm realizing I have a lot of murder in my heart. And someone might want to come take my car keys. Not let me out of the house.
And the most agonizing part of these things is the close but no cigar. Part of it is the, 3 damn votes. It's the Marconi Awards that are supposedly given to the best in our business, and then folks who have basically not done what the award is supposed to be about, right? Which is community service and giving back and creating environments for listeners like Bob in Cherryville. And, and then it goes to somebody who records a weekend show.
And is on TV.
That's it's about classic hits, and happens to have been on TV. And so it can be a little bit, frustrating when you go and you see basically a bureaucracy bestowing an award, which is supposed to be the highest honor an industry has, on folks who are less deserving than a lot of the candidates.
Not just us. Yeah. A lot of them.
Not just us. Yeah. No, not just us.
Yeah. Oh, we see this happen. We see this play out. Yeah.
It's a rare occasion that we see someone who really, really deserves to win it. There's a gentleman in the Hudson Valley, actually, who's been working on an AM station for years and years and years. When I say years and years, it was like 55 years. And he got a Marconi Award, and I was like, damn straight. I was so happy for him, but in a lot of cases, and particularly when it gets into larger markets, that's not always what happens. But I was really happy.
We're in the most brutal category. As my mom put it to me one day, well, Cher, you lose to the biggest names. And that's something. I mean, we've lost to Paul Harvey, Dick Clark, Rush Limbaugh, Howard Stern, Mancow Muller. Who else have we lost to? We've lost everybody.
Jesus used to have a syndicated show. We lost to him one year.
Yeah. But Jesus got out of network radio because Jesus was like, Jesus, this is a lot. But hear what I'm saying, and this is not BS. Buddy, have I had a time of it. I am a scrappy little weirdo welfare brat from the wrong side of town who has just gotten to interview presidents and travel all over and meet people and have a million hugs. I have had a great friggin' time. I've been able to raise my children and put braces on their teeth and all the things that I didn't have. I've had an amazing run. I just wanted this for Bob. I just wanted this for him. And I was like, can we have it just for him? And it didn't come to pass and probably won't. And you know what? That's okay, because none of it really matters. But I wanted it for my little friend because I know it meant something to him. And I've known for a very long time that if we didn't get fired or kidnapped, this day would come. And I tried to grieve it, what we call anticipatory grief. Max and I talk about this a lot because we went through this with his mom and dad. You think that by grieving it, you're preparing yourself for the real thing. And the truth is you're not. There is no dress rehearsal for a transition like this. Bob has been my playmate and my instigator and my comrade in arms for my entire adult life. And that a change like this doesn't happen without leaving a mark. And so throughout the process of January when Bob was, and he resisted it, of course, because he's Bob, but we forced him to feel the love, just like we force him to get hugs sometimes. I swallowed back all of my own feelings because I wanted this to be about Bob. So a couple of weeks ago, after the happy hour that me and Tony and Heather did, Bob did not want to join us. He was so emotional. He's just really in his feelings, and he's overwhelmed by the love that people have shared. But he watched that happy hour unbeknownst to us. And we signed off, and my phone rang, and it was Bob. And I said, "Hey, Bob." And he was like, I just watched happy hour. And then I started to cry, and he started to cry. And we were on the phone for almost an hour. And we were just saying, you know what? How many people can say that they spent their grown-up life playing with their little friend next door and reaching out to people and just going, I know, right? It's life. You're not crazy. We have been so lucky, and we've been so blessed. And when it ends, not if, when, there won't be any regrets or bitterness. The only thing that we will feel is sorrow to leave you. Because when we say, like at the end of the Oddcast or True Weird Stuff, thanks for being here. You're who we make it for. Yeah. You're the reason we do this. That's true. In 2011, I went back to school because radio was so awful. We were owned by a corporation that's since gone under. Radio was so awful that I was having a frigging nervous breakdown. This was before Tony came back and rejoined us. And I went back to school fully expecting to change careers. And at the 11th hour, Tony parachuted in. And I was like, well, if Tony's back, okay, all right, put me back in, coach. I'll stay. Because we love you and we love each other and we recognize how fortunate we are. So the show is definitely going to change. I'd be insane if I pretended it wasn't. It's going to change. It's going to be a different show. And I can't say more beyond that, right? It's going to be different. Just like you're different than you were a year ago. You're different than you were before your divorce. You're different than you were before you had your children. We change. And if we're not changing, it's because we're deceased. That's the one thing I want to say. And I'm grateful to all of you that are going to give the show a chance, because I don't want to see these people that I love out of work. Because they didn't go back to school. They didn't build a plan. I'm just being honest. They didn't build the kind of plan B that I so aggressively built, because I just thought I can't take much more. Radio is breaking my heart and costing me my sanity. I can't stick around for more of this. I don't want Max out of work. Heather takes care of her grandmother. I don't want Heather out of work. Tony and I will be okay. You know us. We'll be going door to door selling vacuum cleaners. We'll be fine. Lamar will be okay. But we're going to stick around, even though this show is changing. And our hearts are a little bit broken that our friend has taken his toys and gone home. But we're going to stick around, and we hope you will too. Now, the other thing I want to say is Lamar's been with us since the very beginning. And yeah, he's new at being a full-time radio guy. He was a Budweiser guy. But he's a brilliant guy. He's so funny. He's so smart. His heart is so big. He's a great storyteller. This is his dream, and he's living his dream. And every time somebody posts on social media that he's a redneck and we should fire him, a little more murder grows in my heart. Because, you guys, that's mean and unnecessary and uncalled for. He may not be your cup of tea. I know I piss people off. You know, if I haven't pissed 10 people off before breakfast, I'm having a sick day. He may not be your cup of tea, but he's a human being, and he reads those comments, he sees them, and he shakes himself like a big friendly wet dog, but it leaves a mark. It is not Lamar's fault that Bob decided to retire. Lamar's not the bad guy here. You don't have to like it. You don't have to love it. You don't have to listen. But I'm begging you on my knees. And that's not a position this girl has spent a lot of time in this business. I'm on my knees asking you to not be unkind, because there's a person reading those comments and it's hurtful. It's hurting him.
Sheri, can I just say they can direct it towards me, because there's nothing that they could say to me that's any worse than the things I say to myself. So, you know.
That is so true. That is so true. In fact, the worst thing you can say to Max sounds like a compliment compared to his internal monologue.
Well, I have to say that I'm very excited that 2025 is going to be easier.
It's going to be so much easier. Yeah,
I'm incredibly excited by that.
So they have the insight on this is every time we have a new little change or a technical thing that we're doing, the modernize, he goes, and the reason that it's going to be easy, this is why it's going to be easy. And we all go, great, it's going to be easier. And then some new problem, there's some new leak in the boat that springs up that we have to put our hand over that we hadn't anticipated.
Yeah, and somehow it always, I mean, I don't know if it's gremlins or what, it's snake bitten, but it seems that there's always some wrinkle, right? There's always some wrinkle that we go, yeah, okay, this is going to be great. And we go, oh.
But isn't that a metaphor for life?
No, it is. It is. And I think that anybody listening probably has those same gremlins and that same little snake bitten, choose a cliche, one step forward, two steps back, whatever. Or two steps forward, one step back. But I want to say a couple things. First of all, that sometimes Bob gets the short end of the stick in terms of credit. And I think that, and I want to put a couple things sort of in perspective for everybody listening, that it may or may not matter, but I think it needs to be said. Number one, we were the first show of our kind. And what I mean by that is a show that targets female-based radio stations. We were the first out the door. We were the first. We were the first show that had a woman in a role that was equal to or more forefront than her male partner. Bob Lacey is responsible for that. If Bob Lacey was any other DJ who wanted to be the big guy with the big voice, who was on the mic and got all the laughs, Sheri, you would never have taken the job.
He would never have wanted me to take the job.
Right.
Bob engineered this, and for the first 3 years of my radio career, where I wandered around going, I'm sorry, what does that mean? What are those words? What are you saying to me? And I was like this monotone little goth girl, right? Like, oh God, I can't believe I did it. For the first 3 years, Bob would not allow anyone to even look at me. No one was allowed to say anything to me that could be remotely critical. He was so fierce and protective. He was like a bouncer at a titty bar in South Jersey. I mean, he was ridiculously overprotective, and I loved him for it. He didn't let me see the mail. Nothing. And he wanted to work with a woman. He wanted an equal partner. This show was his vision. He will never get the credit for that he deserves.
Never.
And
no, he's never going to get that credit.
If you read the newsletter, Bob's particular gift, and it's why he was so good on television, Bob's particular gift is making everything look easy and comfortable when it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And people who have that gift, Tony, they don't get their flowers.
No,
They don't
no,
get the credit they deserve.
no, they don't get the flowers. And
So
and
back
I
to
would
you.
I would also add to that one of the most amazing storytellers, Bob, and I think I put something about this in the newsletter. Bob's idols were guys like Gene Shepard and other AM late night talk show hosts from the sort of golden age of radio, who were amazing storytellers. I mean, Gene Shepard, A Christmas Story. And he would take those, that movie is a compilation of some of the things he would talk about on the radio. But I would suggest that Bob has surpassed his idols,
his heroes.
His heroes. I would submit that he's past those. He is an amazing storyteller with an amazing sense of humor, and I hope that at some point, whether it's the Radio Hall of Fame or something else, that he's recognized for that talent. And you're right, it is a skill to make something very difficult look very easy. And I think we've had the experience, the three of us here have had the experience of people who took that for granted. That, oh, well, they just turn on the mic and talk. There is a lot more to this than turning on the mic and talking and making it seem comfortable and effortless and fun. That's a skill set. And I think sometimes Bob doesn't get the credit for it. And I think sometimes even people who have been close to us in our lives, without naming names, have said, well, they're just talking. So it's okay if I call during the show and interrupt. It's okay if I call and tell Max to punch me up. And it's not. And when I see that and when I hear that, that is so disrespectful to all of you who have the talent, because I have no talent, but to all of you who have the talent and make that thing work every morning on the radio, that's utterly disrespectful.
Tone, I've gotten some questions about, because Bob is a great storyteller, and when he settles down to it, it's fabulous. I've had a lot of questions from people. Well, why isn't Bob on the Oddcast, or why don't you guys let Bob take the Oddcast over? Because he doesn't want to. And I could say that. I could say that in a fancier way, but hear me. For the past 2 years, since Bob told me, Sheri, I'm getting close. What do you need, Bob? Well, it's just a lot. I want to pull back from X or Y or Z. One of the things that was just too much for him was podcasting. He's exhausted at the end of the week, and happy hour is a lot. So you notice he's not here. You notice he's often not there. That's his choice, y'all. He doesn't want to. And you know what? That's cool. He's earned the right to not want to, I think. What do you think, Tony?
That's what we get for running our own company. We get to say to Bob, it's okay. A corporation wouldn't. A corporation would say, your contract says that you have to be on all these Oddcasts. And I'm proud of the fact that we were able to give him that ability to just sort of step back a little bit and not be part of it if he doesn't want to be part of it.
And for all of you who love Bob, and boy, have we just sat and bathed in your messages. They have brought us so much joy, and we've cried. And for all of you who love Bob, I need you to know that he stayed as long as he could, and longer than he had to. I don't know how many of y'all would hit a point where you could retire and decide, nope, I love it. I'm going to do it for another, 10 years. He stayed for as long as he could. He did not want to leave 1 minute sooner than he did. But I think with milestone birthday, his youngest finally getting pregnant, I don't know. I just think sometimes that it's time, and he knew. He knew. But he stayed for you. You're the reason we do it. You're who we make it for. And this is brutal.
Yeah. This is this is where we're at. This is where we're at.
So, and if Doc, are you still there in the background? Doc is so quiet.
Yeah, I'm here.
You want to jump in, Doc, with your thoughts before we wrap this up?
Unlike everyone else, I'm not all that great on at thoughts on the fly, but change is hard. I get it, but there's nothing to be afraid of. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I'm excited to see. I'm super. First of all, I'm super excited for Bob to get the opportunity to just live life without worrying about the daily grind of work that he's done since he was literally a teenager. And I'm excited for the rest of us to see what we do and to see how we are able to evolve with the ever growing times. Because one of the reasons I wanted to join the show was because, I'm not sure if anybody knows, but I worked in the same building as Bob and Sheri for a really long time, and I saw how you all were able to evolve the show to handle the situations with management and Sheri and Tony. I knew that y'all were capable of leading in a way to evolve, to continuously evolve, and not just stay where you are and just allow the current times to kind of swallow you up and I don't know where I'm going. I'm just rambling.
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying, because there was a lot of resignation and fatalism in our business. People were like, well, I guess I'm just screwed. And we were like, I guess we're not going to be just screwed, right? It was a completely different approach.
And look, there's some fear. I think that, when we talk about stations and adding stations and stations dropping and, what's happening inside some of these buildings, I think that there's a lot of fear where folks are fearful for their jobs. And so they keep their head down and they do, whether or not they agree with what their corporation higher ups have told them to do, they keep their heads down and they do their job, because if they don't, they could be out of work for months or years. And in almost 100% of those cases, it will require relocation. And as somebody who's relocated quite a bit, I'm here to tell you that's no fun. And for some people, that leaving that comfort zone of friends, of family, of a network, a support network, that's a tough thing to do. That's a really tough thing to do. So tough that you stick with the job, whether or not you love the job. You stick with the job, you keep your head down, and you do what you are told to do, whether or not you believe it's the right thing to do.
And I think, we all can relate to that, which is why, like, I shake my fist at the sky and have murder in my heart. But I do understand, like, I get it, buddy. It's you or us, and you're not going to sacrifice yourself here. You've got bills to pay and a family and all that. So it'll be us. And, when you do what we do, you're a product. We are a product that, again, it's not personal. But
No.
that said, we've been able to remain a product because we struck out on our own. Max, I loved what Doc shared, and my God, that was like Christmas, all in your birthday, all in one. The day Doc told us that he would join.
Oh, amen. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
When there was some mention that Doc was interested in the job, I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
We were like, wait, Doc?
How quick can we
Our
talk to Doc?
Yeah.
I was like, call him immediately, right now. Call him today.
We were so excited. And I called Tony. I said, Tony, and Tony said, all right, I'll talk to him. And so, I mean, the thing about Doc is he thinks about stuff that the rest of us don't even think about. Sheri will say, we really should. He'll go, that's already done. I already did that.
Oh, he's a wizard. Yeah.
He's our Radar O'Reilly. He's steps ahead of us.
I've waited my whole life to find a man that could read my mind. How about you, Max? You got some thoughts as we close?
No, the thing, I don't know that people realize just how close we all are to each other, because, I've done a lot of stage work, and one of the things it's like you're like the flying Walendas, you're going, you depend on each other. The next person has to be there when you swing out over the floor with no net, and you have to depend on that next person for whatever it is. And so we all work so closely together. This is like, it's just a sad day, because we were always our own unit within the radio station, and people hated that. Management hated that. They always hated that. But we were our own little, as Sheri used to say, this thing of ours. Like it was
we were gangsters.
Like it was the mob, And so it's just sad and heartbreaking. I thought I was ready for it, but the day that he made the announcement, I remember that night, I was in full-blown depression about it.
Like we tried to be ready. We tried, but it turns out that you can't. The only way to go through it is through it. Ain't no cheat code.
Mm-hmm. And it's never what you expect it's going to be.
And even as we're like telling you all of this, you will not find 4 people more proud of or excited for Bob as he sets forth on this new adventure.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
People say stuff like he's earned it, because in American culture and in late stage capitalism, everyone, now it's like you poor true weird stuff listeners have to hear this all the time. But in American culture and late stage capitalism, everything's about productivity. Everything's about earning. You're not entitled to anything you didn't work for. You don't deserve anything that you didn't work for. But when it comes to Bob Lacey, he earned this retirement, yes. But more than that, he deserves this retirement. He deserves this experience.
For many
and
reasons.
by God, we're going to do everything in our power to make it awesome. And he has promised that he will come back every now and again. But it's going to be a long time before he does.
Yeah.
Because you know who else is grieving this transition? You know who else's life changed dramatically today? That'd be Bob. Mm-hmm. He spent his whole life in a radio station. He spent the last 3 decades with us. We're like a treehouse. We're his friends. Every day before and after the show, we're just all together, and it's very, very social. And we know everything about each other. So he's grieving, and he's struggling with this change. And he's so scared because Bob, all you Bob fans know that Bob takes everything as his own fault. If it's raining in some town, he's ruined a person's wedding. That's how Bob is, and that's true. Everything is Bob's fault. He takes everything to heart. It's his secret sauce and his worst burden. Every time somebody posts something shitty about Lamar, Bob blames himself. Okay? He's so afraid that by retiring, he's being selfish. And let's be clear, it's the opposite. Yeah, so
absolutely.
Set forth, Chit Chat. Set forth on what we hope are the smooth and turquoise seas of retirement. Forget setting an alarm clock. He never looked at the calendar on his phone anyway, so that's an easy one to let go of.
That never happened.
Yeah. Bob, you could put that. You can make a schedule for that. You can set an appointment in the phone.
No way. No way.
Never.
And go forth knowing that you did something with your life that was special, and that you mattered to people, and that you did no harm, and you brought more good than you took.
Absolutely.
And if that's
Amen.
not a recipe for success, man, I don't know what is.
Amen.
So we're gonna be here, and we'll be here next week with another Oddcast episode. We've got something real special planned for you for next week. We have Talking Lamar this Friday, and if you're a True Weird Stuff listener, we have an exciting True Weird Stuff episode about nuclear bunkers that I think is gonna blow your mind.
Ooh.
And in the meantime, just thank you for everything, for all of it. And we'll see you next time, because you're the reason we do it.